And welcome to our Faith at Work 5-day virtual event. This week, man, we've got five excellent guest speakers with us throughout the whole week. And I'm Bobby Albert with Values Driven Leadership, where we provide you a new way of thinking for a better way of leading. And it's our desire today is to do just that with our guest speaker today. It's a real pleasure today that our guest speaker is Ben Kirksey. He's the Vice President and General Manager of Work Matters, where he leads the day-to-day operation of the organization. Work Matters is a faith-based organization that equips people in the marketplace to integrate their faith and work in a practical and actionable way. And, Ben, his topic today is why working with the right story matters. And Ben, welcome to being here today. We'd love to have you.
Thanks, Bobby. I appreciate being included, and it's cool to see, just a ton of states, like coast to coast, and I think even overseas, popping up on this.
So, yes, that's right.
Fun to be part of.
Ben, would you mind sharing, how did the Lord lead you to Work Matters? If you could take 30 seconds and share that story with us.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess I'd be on the kind of the older end of the millennial generation, and like a lot of my cohort, in college was just starting to ask questions of meaning and purpose. And when I became a Christian and really started following the Lord, I didn't know it at the time, but a lot of the questions I was asking were faith and work type of questions. I just didn't have language for that. So I did a program called Teach for America after I graduated college for a couple of years on the East Coast, and then worked for 4 years back in Northwest Arkansas, where I'm from, in kind of the Walmart vendor community. Walmart's based in Northwest Arkansas, and so that's kind of the main business in town is retail. And the company I was working for, there were several leaders there that were very, call them values driven or faith and work driven. And they just really started to give language to some of this impulse that I've been feeling about what it meant to really follow Jesus in all of life. And there was an organization there that we were ministry partners with. We provided space and donation support called Work Matters. And so my boss and I had created a program just on the side to help equip young professionals to integrate their faith and work. And Work Matters was looking for an offering to have toward younger professionals. And so it was just a very nice match. And after a couple of years, it just got to a point to where I couldn't both do my day job and have a family and lead that on the side. And so the Lord just kind of confirmed that our next step was to join Work Matters full time and really flesh out that program, which is our Work Matters Institute. So that was about 8 years ago.
Wow. Well, we're sure it's such a pleasure for you to be here today. And when you mention your family, I know you and your wife have 2 boys, and so congratulations. My wife and I have 3. Now they're adults now, and I'm so proud of them. I know you have 3 points that of interest you'd like to share with us today, and the first one has to do about we've been shaped and living into a story. Do you mind sharing about that?
Yeah. So just quick caveat up front. You know, when we, in our institute, you know, kind of the thrust of that program and what we do is to help people kind of in the day-to-day grind. And so what I'm talking about today is always where we start, but it's a very upstream type of topic. You know, and might sound a little abstract at first, you know, like why working with the right story matters. But let me just throw a couple of examples out there. You know, how we're shaped by stories. So first one, there's a young woman. She's growing up in Europe, and she has a deep sense of the presence of God. She wants to use her life in service to God, and so she is going to Ireland to study English. She's part of a certain Catholic order, and while on retreat with her order, you know, she has an encounter with the poor, and it just totally changes the direction of her life. And you know who this is. She goes on to be Mother Teresa, perhaps one of the foremost, examples of a life of service and devotion to God. So contrast that with another young man growing up across the Atlantic. He's raised in Cairo. He goes to the University of Cairo. He, graduates with a degree in art and architecture, goes and studies technology in Germany. He goes into a mosque, is somehow radicalized, and ends up becoming one of the masterminds and pilots in the 9/11 attacks because he is convinced that America is the great Satan. So two people, both one believing that service to God means giving one's life away to the poor and the vulnerable, the other who believes that service to God means giving their life away to destroy fellow human beings. So, I mean, the stories we believe in matter. And I know that those are kind of maybe extreme examples, but here's another couple that might be closer to home. In the 1970s, a group of Detroit auto executives go and visit a factory in Japan because to kind of get some insight into the secret of Japan's success. And there's a quote from one of these that said, "They didn't show us real plants. There were no inventories in those plants. I've been in manufacturing operations for 30 years, and I can tell you those are not real plants." Because his story for how work gets done didn't allow for this just-in-time inventory that Japan, really pioneered and used to leapfrog the American auto industry for some time. Or maybe this one. Let's say you have an employee, he's a hard worker, talented, but there's something in him that believes that work is a zero-sum game. That either if he doesn't win over his coworkers, they'll take his spot or he'll lose his spot. And so every criticism about an idea or a strategy or a disagreement and approach to how to solve a customer problem, it's not about those problems. It's now about a play on his job or his positioning. And so there's just a deep impact on team trust and the ability to make good decisions because of an underlying story for what work experience is like. So the stories we believe, they matter, not just in the big picture sense, but in a very practical, everyday sense. There's a theologian, James Bryan Smith, and he says we're shaped by stories.
Huh?
In fact, our stories, once in place, they determine much of our behavior without regard to accuracy or helpfulness. And here's the main point. These narratives are running and often ruining our lives. And that's why it's crucial to get the right narratives. So the main point, why do they matter? How do they shape us? I mean, what we really want people to understand, what we try to practice on a daily level ourselves is that the story that we're living into it needs to be aligned with God's story. And I think we'd all say that, but if we really step back and examine, our life and work, what motivates us, how we make decisions, what we prioritize or deprioritize, what really scares us or what we're really hopeful in, what story would that tell? Would it tell an American dream story, a victim story, a self-made story, a Jesus story? So I guess all that to say, Bobby, that I think that getting the story right, that really drives how we live and work. It's very much an upstream practice. I mean, it determines everything that kind of flows from it. And I think it means two things. I think it means, for Christian leaders to really take an examination of what story we're living into. Again, what do those fears, those hopes, those decisions, those priorities, what do they indicate about what story we're living into? And then secondly, because this is a messy world we live in, and the Christian walk is not a one and done thing, just a consistent realignment with God's story. So, I mean, that's how we even begin to approach our work in a way that's aligned with God's purposes. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Just in terms of just really important, I think, to understand that whether we know it or are conscious of it or not, we are in fact shaped by story, encountering different stories on a daily basis, and are ultimately telling some story to our coworkers and to the world. And that needs examination and alignment with God's story.
So, besides competing against God's story, the way sometimes we live our lives is one of the other points that I think you were wanting to talk about is about the gospel being not only the good news but a practical framework with God's story. Can you share some things about that?
Yeah, I guess just to maybe even get into some context there, I think that if we're just like looking at work itself, like let's say, as Christian business leaders, like we've got a pretty good understanding of of God's kind of the big narrative or story that we're living into, of creation and fall and redemption and renewal, and how God is at work in those things. There are a handful, more than a handful, but here's a few that of just kind of competing, stories that that I think the gospel can directly address that are specific to work. And one is that, hey, work is just about survival. Man, it's I'm working to get paid so I can put food on the table, and I've got to, it stinks, it's hard, but it's just I got to suck it up and do it. And that story is attractive, and we feel this. A lot of us feel it at least at some point during the week, because work is hard. We live in a fallen world, and most people, for most of history, work has been about survival. But the gospel tells us that, hey, work wasn't always that way. It was actually something that is just core to how we're created in God's image. And in Jesus, we have hope of work being recovered and a reflection of the value that God has given us to bring to the world. Whatever our job, we can work as unto the Lord, as your anchor verse, says, Bobby. Secondly, there's, I think that, we can view work as a means of accumulation, or maybe to find security, or as a way to establish our identity or find significance or value. And so, I mean, the gospel, like it fundamentally changes our position. It says that, hey, work doesn't have to give me value. Work is a way for me to bring value. Work doesn't have to be a source of significance or security, because the God of the universe has given himself completely to me, based on nothing that I have done. He has loved me and accepted me, regardless of what I have done. And so I can now, I don't have to, I can work out of freedom. I can work out of love. I mean, these are they're very specific things that I think that the gospel frees us to do. And so on a practical level, on a day-to-day basis, we're all going to encounter experiences, where we feel where we are tempted to live out of one of these other stories. And so I think if we don't notice that and realign ourselves to God's story, that can be the difference of being really fruitful and faithful and just an amazing Christian leader, and just one that looks not altogether different from the rest of the world. So in terms of a practical framework, one of the things that we try to do in the Institute is, as we help people sort of shape their perspective and understand the full story of God, and then engage with Christian business leaders to kind of see how that is worked out, we give them a process to articulate what we call a faith and leadership action plan, which is essentially saying, what is something in my sphere of influence that is broken, that is not as it should be, and then what would that look like if it were totally renewed, if Jesus came back and established things as they ought to be. So, okay, now that I've kind of got a picture of these two things, now what are some very specific next actions that I can take to start to close that gap? And secondly, what are some specific practices that I need to adopt to be the type of person that can close that gap? So for example, there is a woman who worked for a home building company, and she was a project manager, and the brokenness that she identified in her faith and leadership action plan was sort of this antagonistic relationship between the building team and the trades, plumbers, electricians, and such that would come in. Just a fundamentally antagonistic relationship. So before the Institute, for her, that was just an industry norm. That's just part of the story of how construction is done. And and she started imagining, like, well, this in God's kingdom, it's not like that. Like in God's kingdom, we're positioned to collaborate with one another for both to flourish. And so what can I do to close that gap? And so part of it was a prayer practice. She identified a specific person or trade to pray for on a daily basis, just as part of her regular routine to orient her heart. And part of it was identifying some specific steps to help close communication gaps and try to understand what are some root causes of communication gaps. So a very practical, leadership-oriented thing. But all of that was motivated by her recognizing that the story of the way construction was done in her experience was not God's story. And if she was going to live into God's story, then it gave her a practical framework to identify brokenness, imagine renewal, and then outline some steps to get there. So again, there are a number of others, obviously who've gone through our course and have done that. But the point just being that it requires some intentional examination and starting from a place of knowing that God in the gospel through Jesus has already provided any security, significance, a perfect hope, all of these things that we can just inadvertently start to look to work to fulfill. So.
Well, I appreciate the thoughts here about God's story and about the framework, the practical framework, and seeing how we can see our work as a ministry and not just a job we go to. And I've always wanted to, encourage Christian business leaders to integrate the Lordship of Jesus Christ into every area of their life, be it, with their family or even at church, but also in the workplace as well as in the marketplace when you're dealing with customers and suppliers and those kind of things like that. So anyway, Ben, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave with us with a challenge?
Yeah, I think my main challenge would be a work day, stuff just happens so fast in a work day. Like I think that most of us have good intentions in terms of what it looks like to, to use my language, to live out of God's story, to really, follow the lordship of Jesus. But, stuff happens and we react, and, we experience different range of emotions. And I think the main point and challenge that I really like, that I'm trying to do, and that I'd like to challenge all of us to do, is, what practice in our lives can help us consistently realign with God's story. And maybe if you have a regular time of devotion, maybe that's just carving out some time to think back through the day and think, man, I really got angry in that situation. Like, what was going on there? What was if I really believe, where is that misaligned with God's story? What do I need to do about it? So just prioritizing that consistent time to really examine how we have been in the workplace, and what's at the root of that, and realigning with God's story, I think that's been a Christian practice for a couple thousand years, and we need it as badly today in a super fast paced and competitive and just senses blaring all the time environment as ever. So
yeah, for us to even understand the story that we are projecting, I guess it takes a real high sense of self-awareness. It's almost like having some antennas up that you're not normally got up. You're just kind of, going through the day as fast as you can, and then get to bed at night. So
right. Well, and that's kind of that's why I would say that, the day happens so fast, and we need to have kind of those moments where we're just thinking back and, after the fact, trying to pay attention to what happened.
Yeah. Ben, tell us a little more about Work Matters. I mean, what y'all do there, and how people can learn about Work Matters.
Yeah. So we've been around for about 18 years. And our heartbeat from day one is to close the gap between faith and work by equipping people in the marketplace to integrate their faith and work. And so we, over the years, we've done live events. We've put together different content, whether it is Bible study content or kind of video-based series from Christian business leaders, devotionals on the YouVersion platform, just on a number of different kind of faith and work topics. And then we have an institute for young professionals. So think early 20s to late 30s, 12-session course to help them develop a robust theology of work, kind of get insight into the practical application of faith and work, and then ultimately produce one of those faith and leadership action plans. And so we're actively adapting that course from a kind of a live experience into something that can be led by leaders all over the country. And so that's what we're mainly focused on right now. Just kind of through this COVID season, is deploying that course in some different ways. But workmatters.org, I think I'll put that in the chat window. That's the place to go to access any of the resources. Most of them are free. And, so whether it's a devotional or a Bible study or some quick encouragement or whatnot, we hopefully can serve you in your faith and work journey.
And also, you and Work Matters, you have a free gift to offer the audience today. Would you mind sharing that? And we'll put it in the chat window as well.
You bet. So that's a specific resource on the site. We call it on-demand learning, and there are 5 video-based series, and so these are anywhere from 3 to 5 short videos on just very specific faith and work topics. So defining success, overcoming adversity, just redefining your work, and then all of so there will be a short video from a business leader and a discussion guide. And so we've seen these useful for personal study. They're useful if you've got a small group that you want to just have some good faith and work conversation around. And so all of that is free and available on the site there.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And Ben, we'll do a follow-up email today, and we'll include that link in that follow-up email today as well. So at this point, we're going to stop this main session and go into our Q&A time. And I've asked Bob Payton to give us some instructions during this Q&A session.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Bobby. And Ben, been great hearing from you. Some great ideas to try and constantly re-up our game with the Lord, I think is a quicker way of saying that. We want to open it up to questions from the audience. So if you've got questions of Ben, you are welcome to go ahead and put those over in the chat window, and we will verbalize those for you. Or if you want, raise your hand, and we will unmute you and let you ask Ben yourself. But Ben, to kind of get us started, unpack that just a little bit more, to look at our shortcomings as Christian business leaders. How can we do that with our people, with their falling short in the workplace, and help them in a godly way? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that, I'm a young leader myself. Obviously, I think there's probably most folks on the call have more experience than I do in this. So, but one of the things that I am learning and have heard is that, we have to be able to manage ourselves before we can really effectively manage others. And that's not to say we have to get 100% managing ourselves before. That's impossible. Like that's part of the job, is to manage others. But Bob, I guess the first place I'd start is to say, like, hey, am I modeling in my personal practices the type of behavior and like habits that I know will produce fruit and that I know will help people I'm trying to lead? So that would be sort of reemphasizing something I said at the end, that challenge. And I think secondly, a lot of directions I guess I would go on this, but it said that Jesus came, in John it says that Jesus came full of grace and truth. And so if we think of like, how can we be full of grace and truth? So grace being creating opportunities, creating the safety and the freedom for my people to fail or fall short, and to have room for repair. But truth being like a very clear very clear standard that we're holding to. And so that would be kind of conceptually where I'd start.
Very good. Ben, appreciate that. I've got a couple of questions here from folks in our audience. Once again, if you've got one, feel free to put it in the chat window, or use the Zoom controls to raise your hand, and we'll call on you to ask that. But let's kind of take that question and go out into society. Julie asked, how should we address issues of society that contradict our faith at work?
You mean issues that we are directly involved in, or just sort of like issues at large?
And I don't have anything more from Julie on that. Julie, if you want to raise your hand, we'll let you expand on that a little bit, or if you want to put it in chat, we'll be glad to do that, and we'll try and get a little bit better explanation on that. Another question though we'll do in the meantime comes from okay, well here Julie has responded, political issues or sexuality. Are a couple of big ones there. So nothing
No
like hot topics to start off with, right?
Yeah, exactly. Golly. Well, so let me just say first, thank you, Julie. I'll give you my best perspective. With a lot of these though, I mean, you guys know this, but there are just, this is the type of thing like where it's just so helpful to get multiple points of counsel. And I'll tell you, there's an organization called Q, not QAnon or the like Q that's been in the headlines of late, but Q Ideas by Gabe Lyons. It is their whole bent is to help Christians think well about culture. And so they've got a ton of content on specifically related to some of the issues of sexuality and gender, and of course our political moment. So just know that, first of all, I'd jot that down, qideas.org as a really good resource for that specific kind of issues. But I guess the place that I would start is, is it in my area of, is it something I need to have an opinion about just as a citizen, or is this something I need to formulate to make a decision on? In other words, like, how am I going to support or not support, or take a stand or not take a public stand, with my state's transgender legislation, or whatever the case may be. I think that that's really important to distinguish, first of all. Like, do I need to just letter Q ideas.org is the URL. Do I need to am I required at this point, to have a public position or not? Because I think with some of these things, I really would, like, not try to be the one out front, having to take a public position because it is so highly charged right now. So if you don't have to take a public position, then I think that listening to different perspectives, I think that doing, homework and listening to people whose jobs it is to try to formulate thoughts on this, like from Q Ideas, would be a wise way to go. If you do have to take a public position, then it depends on the issue, I guess, but I would also lean very, very heavily and specifically into people whose organizations are really suited for that kind of thing.
Okay. And Ben, that was qideas.org.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. I've got it just put up there in the chat window. Another question, and Bobby might want to start off with the response on this, and then we can come back to Ben. But Doris says, looking for some practical ways of interacting and giving back, words, phrases, policies. And I'm not sure if her question was dealing with some of your stuff, but Bobby, kind of back up 30,000 foot again. As you opened the session, you talked about how you like to pour into people, and that's what this Faith at Work is about. And it is to really help build up our people in our organizations, and that's your goal, Bobby. If you could speak to that for just a minute, and then Ben can amplify anything.
Uh, Perhaps one of my core values is to achieve significance. And to me, that means making a difference in people, for people, and through people. And it's somewhat closely associated with one of my other core values, which is add value to other people. And so I'm always, it's a desire in me that I always want to add value to people, not take away value, and help them make a difference. And in our company, we did extensive, excuse me, training and development in our business. We had a peak season and a non-peak season. During peak season, it was awful hard to do that. So non-peak season, we would spend quite a bit of time training people on skills for the job, but also, and I did a lot of this on teaching, which is biblically based, but it was developing the people, which you're talking about their character qualities, and trying to help them be all that God really wants them to be. And so that was my strength. And there were other people in our company, their strength was training on the job skills. And so that's the reason why I spent more time on the development side.
You need a treat, Bubba? Hang on.
Bob, does that answer your question? Bob, for some reason, I see your lips, but I don't.
I'm sorry. Yep. I apologize. Doris asked a follow-up question about employees or customers or both. And really, let's let you answer that before we go back to Ben, because your company was so unique that it was really a 360. It was employees, it was vendors across the nation. And we've got somebody else unmuted there. And customers and everything else. So Bobby, if you could talk about that for just a moment.
Well, we look for practical ways, since Ben brought up about practical framework, we look for practical ways to minister to customers and suppliers. For years, we ministered mainly to employees in the workplace. And we had such a huge amount of activity, we had to hire an extra person in our human resource department just to help us manage all of that activity. And but we also found ways to minister to customers and suppliers. And some of the practical ideas was we were I was in the moving business, and we were relocating people like from California to Illinois, from Florida to Virginia, from the state of Washington, state of Connecticut, and even some international work as well. And so we dealt with, verbally by phone with a lot of customers. We also dealt with them electronically. And this maybe give you an example on the electronic side, is that when we submitted an email to them as a follow-up, they would always be a place near the bottom of the email where if they wanted to submit a prayer request, they could. And it was, when people are relocating, they put the stress level up there close to about death, about you dying. And so you can just imagine, you got to find a new barbershop, a new beautician, you got to find another doctor, a dentist. I mean, you can just go, the list can go on and on and on. So people are very stressed over their relocation long distance. And so it was amazing how many customers submitted prayer requests. And we had a prayer team that prayed over those requests. And we also did the same thing with our suppliers. And to us, a supplier was, you might call them like contractors, because we had about 3,000 contractors. They were other moving companies, because all over the United States and even some internationally, that because we had more business than we could handle. So we had to work with these contractors to help us get the jobs done, because we were relocating tens of thousands of customers a year. And so these are maybe some other example. We had subscribed to a chaplain service located in Dallas called Marketplace Chaplains. Now we have another guest speaker of another chaplain service coming up on Wednesday. And we partnered with Marketplace Chaplains, because they provided chaplains for our workplace on a weekly basis, and they were on call 24/7. But what we partner with them is, there were all over the United States and even in some international locations, is that if our coordinators talking with a customer, for example, was stressed over their move, they could pick it up. Our coordinators was authorized to authorize our company to pay for the cost of a chaplain. Let's say if a customer was relocating from Los Angeles to Chicago, is that we would pay for the expense of a chaplain going to the customer's home, if that was okay with them. And if the customer wanted it at destination, we would do it again at destination. The same thing with our suppliers / contractors. If they had an employee like in the hospital that they were really worried about for some reason, we would pay for the expense for a chaplain in that city to go visit that employee in the hospital. And so there's when you start opening up people's minds, practical ideas, we had a slew of them. And that's the reason why we had hire an extra person in our human resource department, just to help us with all the logistics, because we were buying Christian concert tickets. We were buying tickets to marriage and financial, marriage enrichment workshops, financial workshops, and, and we, anyway, because the whole overarching is seeing our work as a ministry and not a job. But let me just tell you this, is I ended up selling my company to a publicly traded company, and we had over 150 employees. But after I sold, because we cared so much for our employees, that when I sold a company, if you walked around and visit with employees, they would talk with you as though they own the company and not Bobby Albert. And that's okay with me, but you can't buy that stuff. And I contributed to the culture of seeing our work as a ministry and not a job. And I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know who was a Christian in our workplace and who wasn't. But of course, we had weekly Bible studies. We had other prayer teams praying over employee needs. And I mean, it just would go on and on and on. But if this will give you an idea to start with, is we broke all the activity down between mind, body, spirit, and emotions. Now, for us, emotions was helping people develop healthy relationships, like in marriage and things like that. So if you put, somewhere, write it down about those 4 areas, you can probably list a whole bunch of opportunities for you to minister to your employees in a practical way, like Ben's talking about.
Very good, Bobby. All right. Thank you for that, for jumping back in. Ben, we kind of started that with some asking for some practical. We had somebody asking for some practical tips from you. If you could add a couple to that.
Yeah, I think so. I think what Bobby said was great. And Bobby, I'm curious first, just did you ever get any negative pushback whenever you just offered to pray or to provide a chaplain?
It's interesting. I don't know if it was just because it was part of our culture. As far as I know, we never did.
Yeah, that was my guess. Because I've talked to leaders at Walmart, at Procter and Gamble, and Salesforce, and when there is like good work being done, and when there is a relationship there that you have been invited into, like it's received as it is, an authentic desire to care for the person. And even if they don't believe that, they still see that this is an authentic desire to care for them, which is always received well. So yeah, that was my guess, because I've seen that in other places as well.
Yeah, and if I might add, Ben, is whenever we had, like a company meeting, I always start with a word of prayer. If I knew that they was an employee of a different religion, I would always go to that employee in advance and say, look, I'll be starting the meeting, with a word of prayer. If you want to step out or just not, pay any attention, it's up to you. But I just want you to know you're not going to be put down because of that. And so I think that person respected me because I went to them in advance, and they knew what was going to happen anyway. So, but we we did a lot of things. We call it a part of our ministry, but you might not think of it as ministering to employees. But I also learned, our peak season, our employees were stressed, and I'd bring in a couple massage therapists for the employees, I'd bring in also, of course, it was during the summer months when school was out, a Dunkin' tank, and guess who got to sit in the Dunkin' tank? It was me. And I'd also, later on in the summer, I'd bring in 2 wrecked cars and give our employees sledgehammers just to beat the heck out of those cars. And I'm embarrassed to even say this, but there'd be even some customer names on the side of those cars.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, I just have to be honest. There's just some customers. Look, I'm in this kind of business. We break stuff. We don't show up when we say we're going to. We'll lose something. And I can understand customers being upset, but some customers were just, they were famous because how they behaved, with our employees. And, so you can kind of see things like that. You may say, well, how do you minister to people? It's just while they're having fun at something just for a little short time, they can go home and feel better about the day than they did when they came, so.
Yeah, that's good. I'll just add a couple things on top of that. So one that's more kind of internal, one that's more external. So pick on your commute, or whether that's a walk to the living room or a drive to the office or whatever, like pick a signpost that is your cue to just pray through your day. And there is a leader that has been super involved with What Matters. He used to run Tyson, and his was basically like this. He would pray, to abide with Christ, to have wisdom and courage in all of his decision making, to have a pure heart. And then he would pray through that Ephesians 6 armor of God, just recognizing kind of the spiritual reality every single day. And then he'd pray through his calendar. And I think that what that does is, like, that's sort of that upfront internal work that just gets your head and heart in the right place. And all of a sudden you're not rushing into the day and just thinking about, like, oh gosh, what do I got to get out of this meeting? When is this going to be over? Like, you've taken a few seconds to really, think about and pray for, the person or the decision or whatever, through the calendar. I think that really changes. I think God uses that to give us wisdom and insight that we might not otherwise have, or patience that we might not otherwise have. So that's one. And again, that's just pick a time, pick a cue, and do it every day. And then the external thing, just going back to kind of that conceptual piece I mentioned about Jesus being full of grace and truth. I think that, like, if we manage people, let's just make sure that there is a specific time every week, every other week, whatever that one-on-one rhythm is, and ask, what does it look like to have grace with this person, knowing that we're all making mistakes, trying to get better, and what does it look like to not hold back on truth? Like, if I really love this person, they need to know where their performance or their conduct or whatever has just not been congruent with what we want to be about as a company or an organization. And they're not going to know unless I tell them. And so I think that it's really easy to hold back, to just be full of grace or just be full of truth. And so making sure that there is regular time to have those one-on-ones with employees and, be that mixture of grace and truth, I think gives people a good shot at, whether they're Christians or not, becoming more in line with your culture that you want to create, and better performers as well.
Okay, very good. Sherry, looks like you're driving. You've got your hand up. If you unmute, you've got a question for Ben today.
Yes, I am driving. Thank you. I want to know, you had talked about, like, you're talking about investing in people and what's your story. And I'm blessed to work for a not-for-profit organization that is the largest children's ministry in the world. So we pray twice a week as a group.
Wow.
But I have come into a situation where things had been let go for a long time, even policies that were in place. And I'm trying to develop these relationships so that I can speak into things. I thought maybe you could give some insight into that, because I'm going into my third year, so I've kind of wanted to give some time to develop, and we have made some changes, but now I really want to invest in some people. I'm taking any input you can give me.
Okay.
Hey, Ben.
So make sure I'm clear on the question. You were just looking for ways to invest in, are these people that just peers or people that?
Well, see, yeah, that's a good question, because I was a peer at one time and now I'm the boss.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and you're looking for ways to invest in them. Yeah, Bobby, I think you probably have some good insight on this as well. You want me to just maybe
Yeah,
share a thought or two, and
yeah,
you
please.
Okay. Yeah, so I experienced that too in my smaller nonprofit, where we reorged, and I went from being a peer to being their boss. And I think that I think there were some things that worked well and some things that didn't. I think the thing that I needed to start with, and this is different for different people, is just to you know, be confident, not be confident in myself, but be confident in Christ's new assignment for me. And so, like, however it came to be, like, the assignment now was to be in this sort of relationship, and so I could be confident in that. I don't have to make it awkward, and I don't have to, you know, just make it something that it's not. I think that the thinking about, like, what you should or should not share, like, that was definitely something that I had to learn, because now you're not on the same level anymore, and there are some things that just aren't appropriate to share. But in terms of investing in people, I think that back to what Bobby was saying about prayer, your authentic self and desire to care for people will come through. And so if you are, number one, ensuring that they know what their job is and what it looks like to do a good job, and because I think at work, like, that is almost above anything else, for people's experience. Do I know what's expected of me? And do I know if I'm doing a good job? And that's actually harder to do as a leader, I think, than what you would think it is. But that I would really make sure on that. Make sure there are regular rhythms to have one-on-one time with people. And then structure that in such a way to maybe understand what are the ways that they would like to grow, and within whatever your company parameters are, how can you provide that? So whether that's an online course or going through a book together, or Bobby had lots of interesting different things that he brought in, I know. So that's maybe some basic blocking and tackling, but I find that if you do the basic blocking and tackling, the play tends to have a better chance at working out well. Bobby, what would you add to that?
Well, on the it kind of depends on if you want to help them learn job skill training, or if you want to help them develop into a much more productive person, and that's the development side. Is it in addition to what Ben mentioned, there is, before I would sit down with anybody, I would really pray over it, seek God's word, and it's amazing how the Lord will speak to you when you really need it. And otherwise, seek godly counsel from somebody. If it's something really serious that you need to, you need some help with. And the tendency of becoming the boss when you were a peer is, well, I've been put in this role, now I need to be more demanding. I need to, I've got to change how the kind of person I am. And that's not the case. I think just being your authentic self, like Ben mentioned, is probably more important. And one of the things to work with your employees, it's a term that's often used nowadays, and there's ways of doing it, is engaging your employees. That's a big word, but there's ways to depending on the size of your organization, there's ways of getting them involved in the decision-making process. And Gallup has indicated that they had surveyed like over 85,000 companies and over 1 million employees. And they only found 33% of the companies were engaging the employees. So you got 67% of the employees coming to work every day. They're either disengaged, in other words, I'm just here to clock in and clock out, clock in, clock out, or they're total disengaged. In other words, they're walking the hallway speaking bad about, you know, you as the boss and or about the company, and those are totally disengaged. So there's an indication with Gallup that, because that sampling, that's a huge sampling, that with that Gallup survey that was done, is we have a lot more improvement to engage employees.
Great answers, gentlemen. I want to add one more that was entered in the chat, just in case people didn't see it. Leanne said that their company operates under the policy of delivering positively outrageous service to all we come in contact with, and expect our staff to exemplify that. So in turn, we have a monthly luncheon where we celebrate when our staff has shown positively outrageous service to others, and they get cash prizes, other prizes. Otherwise, we always recognize the rock star with extra awards. It started with servant leadership way back. I just think that's excellent. Great addition there. Thank you for throwing that in there for us this afternoon, Leanne. We talked earlier about some tangible things that you can walk away from today with. And Ben, talk again about, we're putting it in the chat window, the free gift that you are offering everyone today.
Sure. Yeah, wordmatters.org/on-demand learning. It's there in the chat window. And these would be, they're 5 video series. So anywhere between 3 and 5 videos each, along with a discussion guide, questions. Good for individual study, just kind of topical insight, or if you are looking to take some others in your community or workplace through kind of a faith and work discussion, it's a good resource for that. So yeah, you can create a free account and then have access to all of those things today. Great.
Thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you for offering that. That is free for everyone. If you'll just follow that link that's in the chat window, you can take advantage of that, and we will have that, as Bobby mentioned, in the follow-up email that comes out to all of you who are registered today. So I had one more comment real quick before we turn it back to Bobby and Ben to close out. From Carol, she said she found a very helpful avenue when a person changes their position within her organization. Organize a team building meeting presenting the new vision and the new job descriptions. Provide an open roundtable for input from your faithful peer support people, and announce any new boundaries, and the next day assume that new position. So some good input on how to make somebody feel welcome. Bobby, Ben, we'll turn it back over to you. We're running just a little bit long, but it's been great discussion today. So, gentlemen.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Ben and thank everyone for being here today. And this concludes our main session and the Q&A session. And tomorrow we have another wonderful guest speaker. Excuse me. His name is Rick Beatonbow. His company is the largest home builder in West Texas. And he's got some very good practical ideas that some of y'all are asking about, what they do with their employees when they start construction on a home. So Hopefully you'll have a chance in your schedule to be able to attend tomorrow and hear these very excellent practical ideas. So with that, we're concluding.